I think it's pretty obvious to most of us that change is hard. And I want to spend a couple minutes talking about why. And there's a scientific name for why change is so hard. People often describe it as the status quo bias. And you may not have heard of the status quo bias, but if you read the words, you've pretty much got the idea of what it is. We have a bias to stick with the status quo. In almost every domain of life, from the products we buy, the services we use, the restaurants we try, the vacation destinations we go to, we have a bias for the stuff that we're doing already. In general, a candidate, if that candidate is an incumbent, they're more likely to win a higher vote share in an election. If a product or service is the one we're using rather than one we're not, it's more likely to get chosen. Even things like ideas, we're much more comfortable with ideas we're already engaging with than new ideas or ideas that we haven't seen before. And there's some fun research that shows this and shows some of the reasons why behind this in something called the Endowment Effect. And I'll give you just a brief example of it here because I think it's useful. So imagine you're listening to this webinar. And I show you this wonderful, beautiful, or not so beautiful Wharton coffee mug on your screen. And I'm sorry to put a Wharton mug on the screen. You can imagine it's a Rotman mug if you prefer, whatever you like. Just imagine it's a coffee or tea mug that you can hold a hot beverage in. Now, if I asked you, you don't have this mug yet, but I asked you how much you'd be willing to pay for this mug, most of you would look at it and you might say, I don't know, maybe $3, $4, maybe $5 tops. But on average, let's say it's something like $4. On average, the people that don't have this mug would be willing to pay $4 to get it. But if I did something slightly different, if I made this mug in some sense the status quo, I gave you this mug. I said, this mug is now your mug. You can check it out. You can hold it. You can put tea and coffee in it. Now, how much would you be willing to accept to sell it? Right? That situation is very much the same. Same mug, same logo on the mug, same ability to hold coffee or tea. But now that it's yours, now that it's something you already have, while your valuation should be the same, the valuation is different. Now you value that mug around $8, maybe even $9, maybe even $10. Often in some cases, twice as much as you might value it otherwise. We value the things that we're already doing more than the things that we're not. We value the mugs that we have than the mugs that we don't. We value the homes that we live in. The longer you've lived in a home, for example, the more you value it, even above and beyond market price. Now, that's fun and that's interesting and that's good to know, but what that points out is a big challenge for change. Because new things, the change we're hoping people will switch to, or go against the status quo bias. What they're doing in the past is the status quo, and we're asking them to switch to something new, whether that's buying a new product, using a new service, adopting a new initiative at the office, and they're gonna value what they're doing more than they're gonna value that new thing. And so a big challenge is how do we overcome that? How do we overcome the status quo bias? All right, so just to wrap up, and then I think we'll take a couple of questions. Today we talked about how catalysts reduce roadblocks. We said that catalysts don't push harder, they don't provide more facts, more reasons, more information. They figure out what the barriers are and they mitigate them. And we didn't talk about all 5 of the aspects of the reduce framework, but we talked about at least 2 of them. We talked about reactance. When we push people, they push back. So rather than pushing, we need to remove the barrier to change, reduce that reactance by involving people, giving them choice, for example, by providing a menu or highlighting a gap between attitudes and action. We didn't get to talk about endowment, but the idea there is we're attached to things that we're doing already. So there we need to do things like highlight the costs of an action, enabling people to realize that good may not be good enough. Distance is all about, often we ask people to do too much from where they are at the moment. If we ask them to do too far or too big an ask from what they're already considering, they won't do it. And so we do need to do things like ask for less and chunk the change. I'll let you read about that in the distance chapter. Uncertainty is all about that anxiety we feel or that uncertainty we feel around risk, right? We need to ease uncertainty by lowering the barrier to trial, whether it's through harnessing freemium, providing test drives, driving discovery, doing other sorts of things, allowing people to experience the value of what we want them to. And there's some great examples in the book of that in a management or leadership context as well, allowing people to experience something so we don't just have to tell them it's good, but they get to try it themselves. And there are even some great examples of that within organizations, more on the management side.